A guilty verdict has been reached in the so-called Bridgegate trial. Bridget Kelly and Bill Baroni, former allies of New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, have been found guilty of all charges of conspiracy and fraud as they related to what amounted to a political retaliation plot. CBS News legal analyst Rikki Klieman now joins us by phone to discuss. And again, Rikki, this has been years in the making. Has the aftermath and the result here. So what does it mean for Bridget Kelly, former chief of staff to Chris Christie, and his Port Authority appointee, Bill Baroni?
Well, it means for both of them two things. Number one is sentencing, and number two is appeal. So in terms of sentencing, they are facing a number of conviction counts, but ultimately we're really looking at 20 years is the largest amount of time on the most serious counts. And since these all are about one transaction, I certainly can't imagine that any judge would consider stacking the punishment. And when we say it's a maximum of 20 years, that certainly does not mean that they are going to get anywhere near 20 years, or perhaps they are. What happens in terms of sentencing, Josh, is that both sides will prepare lengthy sentencing memoranda. The probation office or its equivalent will investigate the background of these two defendants. The probation office will make a recommendation to the court in what's called a pre-sentence report. So that's what we're looking for them immediately. While saying that, they will go forward and appeal. And they have some issues that is certainly one of them, which would be very viable on appeal.
And I know that speaks to, in fact, the judge not allowing the defense to re-instruct the jury as it pertained to establishing a motive here?
Correct. It was very interesting because it's rare that a defense lawyer gets so exasperated in open court, obviously not in front of the jury, but the defense lawyers were so exasperated that one of them just slumped down in his chair and said, well, you might as well direct a verdict of guilty, when the judge re-instructed the jury. And what the judge basically said was, in answer to a question from the jurors, the judge instructed them that they could convict these defendants of a conspiracy, even if the lane closures were not meant to punish the mayor. In essence, without a motive. So basically, if they agreed together or with Mr. Wildstein, who is the government's witness, who is someone who pled guilty as in order to get a lesser sentence, Mr. Wildstein and either of these defendants, and now both, let's say they just simply agreed that they were going to do this lane closure for whatever reason, well, maybe they wanted to do it for the traffic study, which was their defense. So by saying the motive didn't matter, I think that that's a viable issue. The defense lawyers moved for a mistrial on the basis of the judge's instruction. So this is not a small matter.
We should also mention, again, for those who are joining us, perhaps who do not remember or not quite familiar with this case, that this stems again from what was now a jury has now found essentially to be retribution against a Democratic mayor in Fort Lee, New Jersey, Mark Sokolich, who refused to endorse Chris Christie's 2013 reelection. And so, again, lanes on the George Washington Bridge, the world's busiest bridge, were closed and certainly impacted Mayor Sokolich's constituents. I mentioned Chris Christie here, Rikki, and the defense for Bridget Kelly and Bill Baroni largely followed a strategy that essentially cast the defendants as pawns of much greater forces. And by that, I do mean Governor Chris Christie. What does this mean for a man who, for almost 3 years now, has very publicly maintained his innocence?
Well, we're looking again at two things, Josh. One is political reality and one is legal reality. Not only did the two defendants use a defense that, in essence, we were just following orders, or we were doing these actions with the approval of the governor, but also the prosecution really used Christie's name in vain, and that Christie became the central focus of this trial, even though he is not a named defendant. So let's look at it politically. politically, this is a very, very difficult situation for New Jersey's Governor Christie. That he is really looking at going forward or continuing in office another year with this over his head. Where he can go in government after this remains to be seen, because it's always looming out there. In addition, he was actually served with a summons for a criminal complaint, returnable, I think, November 23rd in the municipal court for misconduct. And where that's going, we don't know. So that moves us over to the legal side. People ask me all the time, do I think that as a result of this trial, that Chris Christie is then going to be the next defendant in the box on these charges? And the answer to that is, we don't know. What would have to happen is that you would need not only Mr. Wildstein, who already testified, and he was looked at as, in the vernacular, Christie's henchman, that if you had Wildstein in either one or both of these defendants, who would be offered a better deal if they would come in, cooperate, and testify against Chris Christie. I mean, that's possible, but do you really want a trial against a powerful or once powerful governor with 3 witnesses who are getting deals? And that's all you've got. That's a sloppy trial.
And certainly is a question that will be answered soon. I mean, and you know, in speaking meanwhile to the political impact, there is certainly a great deal of reporting, especially in days recent, that suggests that it was the looming verdict that has now been delivered that, in fact, may have cost Chris Christie the chance to be Donald Trump's running mate.
Not only that, election. Josh, if I can tag on that.
Yeah.
That's also why Chris Christie is not going to be able to get a cabinet position because of Bridgegate. If nothing else, he could not survive a Senate confirmation.
Well, I know, Rikki Klieman, you know this case inside and out. We very much appreciate your insight. Again, guilty verdicts delivered on all charges for Bridget Kelly and Bill Baroni in the so-called Bridgegate trial. Rikki, thanks so much.
Thank you, Josh.